My guest today is entertainment lawyer John Mason and his brand new book, Crazy Lucky: Remarkable Stories from Inside the World of Celebrity Icons. And he was named Entertainment Lawyer of the Year by Billboard Magazine and has represented a variety of icons in the entertainment industry throughout his career, including Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson, Reba, Shakira, Olivia Newton-John, and Brian Wilson, just to name a few. Now, he has served as chairman of the Nevada Film Commission and as a member of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities. So, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for an enlightening interview today as we're going to reveal some of the biggest names in entertainment and the stories behind them. So, let's welcome an icon and a legend in his own right, John Mason, to the show. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you, Ward. It's great to be with you.
Well, first off, why did you want to write this book, Crazy Lucky?
That is such a good question. I didn't want to write a book. I never wanted to write a book, but these stories, the stories that I tell in the book, just resonated with people. And I've been talking. People want to know about Shakira. They want to know, particularly, say, Brian Wilson, because of the crazy stuff with Dr. Eugene Landy and what's Reba really like. We've seen her on TV over and over. So What a few years ago in a tequila drinking event, my friend said, "Why don't you just write the stories?" And I did. I thought, I want to write these stories. I want to tell these stories, and it'll be a fun book. And there it is. It's done. It's out
Well,
there.
one of the things I loved about this book, John, was it's all the stories. Now, the stories about the celebrities, they come across, they're very positive. This is not a negative tell-all whatsoever. It shines a great light on all of these artists that you worked with, but you balance it out to kind of give us a little bit of maybe the dark side with the people who are connected to the celebrities, such as the handlers, the managers, the record label executives. So I found the book extremely balanced on both sides, but it was an absolute joy to read.
Thank you. Gosh, I really appreciate your saying that. I don't know that I have negative stories about the people I've worked with. I have worked with some that I couldn't say nice things about, but no, I didn't want to do a tell-all. But I wanted readers to know to feel the experience of being in the home of a celebrity, of talking to them on the phone every day. That thought process that goes into what am I going to do? A lot of it is what would I do next? How can I make a better record? You know, when you hear or you read the Michael Jackson story, and you can picture him sitting there with headphones in a meeting, just moving to what might be Beat It or Thriller. You know, it's fun stuff. And thank you for commenting on it.
Well, let's start off with Brian Wilson. Brian's story is, I guess, what, part mystery, part sadness, but also part genius.
He he was really truly a genius, a musical genius, a human genius. Having known Brian most of my life, I think you'll know because you read the book that we met on the stage in about 1962. But working closely with Brian 20 years later, he had caused too much damage to his brain and his body from his reclusiveness, and the reclusiveness involved taking drugs to try to balance his life, balance his thought process, and drinking and eating and overeating and living in a sandbox. So the genius part never changed. In the 8 years that I worked with Brian, with Eugene Landy, he was writing incredible music. He would be playing it for me. In fact, Brian wrote and recorded a song for our wedding called John and Bianca's Wedding, and we still have it. And it's as good as any Beach Boys record. But it was just Brian. He didn't have Beach Boys on it.
You know, the story of Brian Wilson, because you kick off the book. Of course, you tell your backstory, how you got into the entertainment business, becoming an entertainment lawyer, but then you start the ball rolling with Brian. And what I noticed in this book, there's this underlying theme. You have the celebrities in which you have represented, but then you also tell the stories of the other side where the handlers of these celebrities, some of them become a problem. They become very controlling. They love the lifestyle. They get used to it. They don't want to lose it. But then you have the celebrity side in which they're like, okay, I would love to get rid of this person, but I don't want my career damaged. For you
Right.
as an entertainment lawyer, how did you balance out both sides?
I've done a fair amount of firing on behalf of artists because they're basically kind of hard and a little timid when it comes to that kind of change. But overall, my relationship has been directly with the icons, not through a manager or an agent, and I've mentioned that in the book. But I'm going to show you something that came in the mail today because it's so fun following what you just said. So this is congratulations, and this is from a handler. That's why I'm opening it. So this came in the mail this morning, and this is whoop, I moved it the wrong way. Susan Mineo was the manager of Donna Summer. And Susan wrote this note, which I just got. That's why it's on my desk, thanking me for kind words about her and Donna. And I'm putting this in the context that Susan Mineo was the absolute greatest manager Donna Summer could have had. Uh, I loved working with both of them. They worked so well together. It was like two sides of the coin. So generally, back to the question, I didn't have too much firing. In the Landy Wilson, I was the one that got fired because I told Brian it had to be me or Eugene, and he picked Eugene, and Eugene called me to chew me out for trying to get him fired.
Well,
I
yeah,
think
but there's a
one of the
long
humbling things
story.
in my book. Sorry, Ward, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, 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 because I know that in your book you tell this story about Eugene Landy, and that really came an issue in the press because we're all familiar with some of Brian's health issues. When did he finally get rid of Landy?
After I was gone, his family, particularly his wife Melinda, decided the only way they were going to get rid of Landy was to have him removed by a court, and they did that. And Mike loved part of that. Um, Brian's daughters. Brian wasn't even allowed to speak to his daughters during the time that I worked with Brian. He wasn't allowed by the handlers, who were all under the control of Landy. I have to call them handlers because they brought Brian. Many times they didn't sit through the meetings, but Brian was recording the meetings to play the whole meeting for Landy anyway, so he heard everything. But I did really feel comfortable working directly with Brian, explaining everything to him, learning how he thought, and all's well that ends well. Ended up we were friends to the end.
Well, what is your fondest memory of Brian Wilson?
My fondest memory is him writing John and Bianca's wedding and recording it for us, and then coming and playing and singing at our wedding. Really, really a great memory.
Yeah, I could imagine. And so many people are in this book. And I have to bring up Quincy Jones. That is an icon among icons in the entertainment industry. And I saw this quote in your book and I wrote it down and I absolutely loved it. So I'm going to let you explain it. And Quincy, you said that if you were around Quincy, you were going to be successful. What did you mean by that?
Wow, it's humbling to even talk about Quincy Jones. I did speak about the honor of meeting Quincy, but from the days when he was a trumpet player and an arranger, composer, working with Frank Sinatra to discovering the Brothers Johnson, producing Michael Jackson, creating a record company, Patty Austin, James Ingram, uh, everything that Quincy put his mind to do worked. And he was a musical genius. It's just the way he thought. And talk about genius. What about The Color Purple? That was Quincy. That that came up with let's do that and let's cast Oprah Winfrey. Yeah, everything Quincy touched, and I was speaking to him at least once a month until he passed last December, and he was still working and working and working on everything and enthusiastic and creating things that people would enjoy for forever.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let me ask you this because you spent a lot of time with Quincy. Uh, what was the greatest lesson you learned from Quincy Jones? One about life and the other about business.
Well, in life, Quincy had the aneurysm, and his friends and family had scheduled a memorial for him. And there were so many people going to come, it was going to be in an arena. But he thought his way through it, he fought his way through it, he came back. The only thing Quincy wasn't able to do was play the trumpet anymore because of the loss of veins in his head. Uh, on the business side, I learned that there's no limits to what you can do, and I put that in this context. Quincy asked me to make an artist deal for him at A&M Records, and I said, Quincy, what are you going to do, man? You don't play any instruments anymore. He said, don't worry about it. Just get me the deal, and we did it, and it became Quest Records, and the records. I think there's some Q records back there. He did The Dude. Remember The Dude? It's a great Quincy Jones album. Um, I have to look back, but we're going this way, not that way. So I also would say in business, never take no for an answer. You know, we did all kinds of things that Quincy believed that he would say to me. We had breakfast all the time. John, I need you to do this, and how am I going to do that? Well, you'll figure it out. So yeah, in business, no limits.
He made his visions reality, didn't he?
He did, and in every way, graphically and musically.
Okay, so when Michael Jackson entered the picture, and we know that Michael wanted a solo career, and there's something in this book that I am so happy that you brought up because you literally killed the media's narrative on this whole situation with Michael and his brothers because you revealed that Michael was loyal to his brothers despite what the press reported, correct?
Yes, and emotionally so, because at the time Michael had decided for sure to do the solo career, the brothers were dependent on him, and their dad, who was then their manager, Joe Jackson, accepted that Michael could be a very successful solo act. So Joe brought in one of Michael's smaller, I mean, younger brothers. He was smaller too, Randy, and tried to fit Randy in, but it was never going to work with Randy trying to replace Michael. So the brothers in one meeting, I'm talking about Tito and Jermaine, said, "Well, Michael, we need you to do at least one last album and to tour with us." And Michael did. At the peak of his beginning of his career, when he was a giant, he was on tour with the Jacksons, doing his thing, and he supported his brothers forever. And I'm not talking about financially, you know, that's not something I would comment on. I'm talking about musically. When they needed a hand, he was always there.
And out of all of the brothers, Michael was on a whole nother level, but Michael Jackson as an artist, even till this day, was on a whole nother level musically. I mean, and I know there was a little bit of rivalry between Michael and Prince, but both of them were musical geniuses that we don't see that today.
Maybe not. I'm not following music as much, but yeah, Michael, personality, stage wise, musically, and Prince, of course. But you know, somebody had commented to me about those guys. They both were such geniuses, and they were both so infatuated with the work. They ended up not being able to sleep and taking medications, and they couldn't turn the talent off. And I think if either of them were here today and healthy, they would still be able to knock all of us out any place, even in an arena or a stadium. Those guys, just you're right. Nobody like them.
Yeah, I still think of the Super Bowl performances that they both did. They're still rated as the best ever. Um, but you sitting in the presence of Michael Jackson, what was it like for you when you found out that he was sitting there with headphones on, like you just previously mentioned, but he was actually listening to the albums with like Thriller and Bad before they were ever
Yeah,
released? That's a magic moment.
it was a magic moment, and I love telling the story. And I tried not to be annoyed that Michael wasn't listening to me. You were sitting in meetings with the brothers and the family, and Janet and Latoya and Rebby were there, and Catherine and Joe, all in my office in a circle. And there's Michael, the center circle. Also with the Beach Boys, when we had meetings, would be the clients and me, because that was what the meeting was about. And Michael would just, I think I did that before. He's like, Michael, or Tito, or somebody, Marlon, Michael. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mason. I'm just listening to some new music. It's just so cute. This is a really innocent time for Michael, and I was happy to tell great stories about Michael because so many other things happened, and so many people think so many other things. But this guy was a good kid. He was really really polite. Beyond that's why when I do the invitation, always call me Mr. Mason.
Well, were
My
you
kids don't call.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
No, I just said my kids don't call me that. It's funny. Everybody calls me John.
Well, you mentioned it in the book, but at the very moment, were you shocked that Michael passed away?
Wow. Was I shocked? I was shocked in the sense that we were losing somebody that still had a lot to give. I wasn't shocked given his health and health concerns, and really his mental capacity had diminished too. He just was acting very strangely. Just hard to imagine he was about to go on tour, and yet here he is in a device and taking anesthetic medication. So I wasn't shocked physically. I was just disappointed that we did lose such a genius.
Yeah, I remember interviews by Michael where he would say that he could never get the beat out of his head, which is why
Right.
he was, using drugs to fall asleep with. And I felt so sorry for Michael because that was just a talent that I don't know. I guess the only way I can call it was an anointing that most people will never get. And he didn't know how to tame it.
No, that's true. And the time that I was in the meetings with Michael and he's creating the product were just simple times. He hadn't gone on to those outfits and the white glove and all of that. That was all just genius. He thought it all up himself. Nobody told him to do that.
Well, I love the chapter on Roy Orbison, and he was really the prime example as to why you got into entertainment law to protect the artist from getting screwed over, correct?
That is absolutely 100% true. It's still true. I love talent, and it was my mission from when I was in high school and playing guitar in bands to find a way to protect artists in contracts and negotiations. It just took me 7 years to get there, but it's all good.
Well, are bad record deals still being signed today for those who can actually get one?
They are in some ways even worse because as bad as the original deals were, and I started thanks to Quincy working with artists like Billy Eckstein, who had signed contracts in the 40s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the Andrews sisters, and they were really bad in terms of the economic benefit the artist could get, as in the infamous 5 cent royalty and not getting paid for breakage because albums could break and paying for your own cover. All that is bad. But today, well, we fixed all that. Really got the royalty rates. We as collectively, me and other lawyers who do what I do. I'm not a royal we, but the contracts today, the royalties are relatively unfair concerning the economic value of what people make from the music. But at the same time, record companies now are insisting that they participate in concert income, personal appearance income, your acting motion pictures. It's called the 360 deal because they want a piece of everything the artist does. And they still want to own the master on top of that. And it's really unfair. It's not better.
Yeah, but I keep hearing horror stories from other recording artists about how their contracts. I've interviewed people, musical legends from the '70s, even from the '80s, and you hear about these deals to where, hey, we're going to give you $1 million. You put the album out, you go on tour, but in reality, you're paying that $1 million back.
You're paying every cent of it. I work with an artist too. Try not to get specific. They were a very successful rock group in the mid '80s, and they had platinum albums. They're up there, and to this day, they never got paid anything because of all the money they owed for tour support, recording costs. But I fixed it. We went back and reset the whole deal, retimed it, and they got paid and they get paid. It's just you have to fight to get paid in the business, and it's maybe harder than it ever was because you're fighting giant corporations now. The Universal that was MCA that I wrote about in the book, and many people ask me the lawsuit between Olivia Newton-John and MCA and Lou Wasserman refusing to negotiate with her and me. We went to his office. That company is now Universal. Who knows? Worth $100 billion. There's no personal aspect. There's no more Lou Wasserman. Yeah, Lucian Grange is the chairman now. Try to get a meeting with Lucian and negotiate with him. And yet, Olivia Newton-John and I sat across the desk from Lou Wasserman, who was the chairman and the principal stockholder. So that part's tough too. The big companies, Spotify, for example. Come on, it's hard to fight billionaires.
Well, has streaming made contracts more difficult? There's no money in streaming
There
for the
isn't.
artist.
So you if you're an independent artist, it's a real problem. The bigger companies, let's say it's Warner or Universal or Sony, they have interests in the streaming entities, and they get paid better. So if you're getting a piece of what they get, it's okay. It's not what it should be. Of revenue sources for artists, I mean, sound exchange is still really big, and that's 50% to the record company and 50% to the artist. That's the way Sound Exchange pays the money, and they collect about $1,300,000,000 for airplay, not streaming. And I'm always getting that piece for clients. It's a great source of income because the other one is concerts. Artists that can make money in concert still do. In fact, Frankie Valli, my client of decades, is 92 and still. I talked to him last week. He's doing 50 shows this year. I there's money in it, and they don't need the money. They have Jersey Boys, Frankie and Bob Gaudio, but no, still good money in that.
Yeah. I mean, when I read your book, I was so amazed and I loved it so much. If this was a movie, I want to see the sequel.
Yeah, my wife. We went out to dinner with a friend who's a record producer, and he was saying, I want to hear part two. The funny thing about part two, if I ever get to write it, and of course that depends on how well this one does, I have 1,000 more stories about 1,000 more artists. I just wanted to take ones that I really spent my time with, like Olivia, right? We had 50 years working together. But there's plenty of stories, and one of the favorites of my family and friends who know about it is ABBA. I was the lawyer for ABBA their whole career, and having dinner with them in Stockholm when the king came by to say hello to at the table, it was really fun. So there's fun stuff. That'll be the
Well,
sequel.
well, I can't wait for the sequel, but I also want to ask you too, because now, ladies and gentlemen, when you read Crazy Lucky, and I'm encouraging you to read this book because it is a fantastic read, but you really have to read the chapter on Roy Orbison because I learned things that I didn't know about Roy. You're going to learn things you didn't know about Roy, and you're going to appreciate not only Roy more, but his talent, John, was off the chart. Sometimes I will sit here in my office and I will just listen to the song Crying with him and Katie Lang because it is a work of art.
It is a work of art, and I find Roy's story moving, even from when I got in when I first met Roy in that breakfast meeting in the Beverly Hilton. But I'm always telling people who don't really get why Roy is so legendary to watch the black and white. That show is called Black and White, done 2 months before Roy passed, and there you have Bruce Springsteen and Katie Lang and all kinds of great artists up there playing. I mean, they're actually performing with Roy. It's not like they step out and did a performance. The band is all stars. So in 1992, Black and White, produced by Barbara Orbison, is awesome.
Yeah, every time I think of Roy, I get a smile on my face because his music is so legendary, but it's the voice that is so legendary. But you also repped both Shakira and Gloria and Emilio Estefan. How would you
Yeah.
describe their approaches to business?
They are among the most astute business people that I have ever met, let alone work with. Um, if I started with Gloria, when I met them via their manager in a garage in their house in Miami, Emilio was already planning a business that exists to this day, EEI, Stefan Enterprises Inc., that owns restaurants and record albums and music publishing, buildings. Um, Gloria is absolutely wonderful, and she has become an incredible mom. Her kids have grown up, but Emilio goes to the office and works every day to this day. If I called Stefan Enterprises right now, oh, by the way, he has the same cell phone number today that he had when he got the cell phone because I've called him on it. Uh, Shakira is an anomaly because she's like driven by the business, but she's even more driven by her talent, her gift, her songwriting, her performing. When she did the Super Bowl, they she knocked it out of the park. But she rehearses, she rehearses for tens of hours, hundreds of hours to do one thing, and she makes the best records in the world. But she was tortured to be a client because she wanted to read with me every line of every contract before she would sign and ask questions. Who would complain about spending the whole day with Shakira? I don't ever say that. But the process to get from 9 or 10 in the morning when we'd start till 9 or 10 in the evening when we'd finish it's grueling. But I love her for that. I never had another client that wanted to do what she does. Although I recently had one that came close on a deal, film composer. So it's fun. They're great business people.
Yeah, and I really love that the stories that you tell in this book of yours, Crazy Lucky, because even for people like me who are just fans of all of the people you represented, there's life lessons to be learned through this book. You know, it's almost like you got to understand who are your real friends, and in a way, keep your eyeballs out and your ears open for those that are around you because you need to be
Oh,
careful who you allow in your inner circle, correct?
absolutely. It's just a really, really difficult problem. And a lot of young artists keep friends and family on their team because they do trust their friends and family. And a lot of the time, those are the very people who would take advantage. If you think, like, the worst example is the interpreter for Shohei Ohtani, who's the closest person to him in the United States because Ohtani couldn't speak English, and this guy who's now in prison is stealing $18 million, and that kind of thing happens. I just saw in the paper. Don't mention names. The mother of a rapper is going to prison for participating with her son in a fraud. You got to be careful who you associate with, even if it's your child. Sorry, it's not funny stuff. It's just, you're right. It's cautionary tales. So when younger artists ask me, which happens more when I do author events, how could they get to be in a position that the artists that I've represented were in, and I just say, I don't know. I think if you read the book, each story is a lesson in how that person accomplished what they did. But the name of the book isn't Crazy Lucky by accident. You have to be crazy lucky and work at it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because I thought, because when I first read the title, started reading the book, I understood the title Crazy Lucky. And I've never met you. Um, by reading through your book, I believe that you are so grateful for such an incredible career, working with some of the most famous people on earth. You never really appeared in the book starstruck at all. You were just grateful and thankful to be where you wanted to be and enjoyed the whole experience, regardless if you had to, well, knock a few heads around once in a while.
Yeah, that's my job. Um, I feel blessed to have met the people and work with them. Yeah, I don't feel starstruck by anybody because we're in the same business. We are the two sides of the coin. I say often enough, and it's probably clear in the book, that Olivia Newton-John and I were the best partners, the best pair that understood each other and stood up to everybody. And, for all the complaining about Olivia winning Country Music Award in 1974 and not singing well enough, she just kept going and laughing, loving it, giving, giving, giving. And that's the way I'd like it. Would I be starstruck? Well, anybody would be starstruck to meet Olivia. When I tell the story in the book of when I went to her house and she was out by the pool in the bikini, that wasn't so much starstruck. It's just shocked. I didn't expect it. But anyway, yeah, that's what I do.
Well, I love the chapter on Olivia because of the fact as you read it, you learn that she's the same person that all the fans love, but she's also the same person when she's at home.
Yes,
And
she
I love
certainly.
that.
Yeah, me too. I I talked toward the end of that chapter about when Bianca and I went to see her 3 months before she passed, and she still managed to get out with her walker and the bag, putting the fluids, and laugh with us. So yeah, she was everything at home that she was in the images, and I can see over my own shoulder that Grease album with Sandy on it, and John Travolta back there. We went through all of that, all of us. And John was so beautiful at Olivia's memorial, spent an hour. We were talking about being on the set of Grease. Happy memories. Yes, I've been crazy lucky.
Well, she's a perfect example because she really paid attention to her public persona. And you bring up the story in the book about the song Physical. And Tina Turner turned it down, and Olivia was afraid to do it, but it ended up being the right move, correct?
It was brilliant. I would give Roger Davies, who was the manager of Tina Turner and ultimately moved away from Olivia, credit. He found the song. He pushed Olivia to record it. I think given what she said to me, she was afraid to record it because of the image change. But look at the video. The video for Physical is so fun. It's so funny with the treadmill and the fat guy and the tights and all those things that she kind of was spoofing Jane Fonda. It turned out to be one of the greatest records. Well, I think it was the biggest record Olivia ever had. One of the biggest records of all time. 16 weeks at number one. So it worked out well.
I would say so. Now, not too long ago, I had the opportunity to interview songwriter David Malloy, who helped pen many of Eddie Rabbitt's hits. What was it like working with Eddie Rabbitt?
It's just great. Eddie was so much fun and so strange in like feeling like he needed to wear costumes out in public, and he'd say we'd have a meeting and he's putting on a fake beard and he said, "How does this look? Could you still recognize me?" It's like, Eddie, no one's going to recognize you anyway. How could I tell you that, Eddie? I mean, because I also simultaneously in that time was representing Kenny Rogers. Kenny would be way recognizable, right? Because he's on TV, he has the gambler, but Eddie had the monkey. Eddie was just the funniest guy and great, great, great entertainer, great songwriter. I think because I listened to the Prime Country station a lot, those records stand out. David Malloy made the sound of "Driving My Life Away" and "I Love a Rainy Night." What a talent! You know, I still so I was talking about last night. We had dinner with a producer, Tony Brown. Tony Brown is that kind of producer that you hear his records and you go, that is great. 20, 30 years later, I'm hearing some great stuff. So David and Even Stevens and Eddie Rabbitt were three major characters that seemingly had nothing in common, but when they got together, they did magic.
They did. Now, you also repped Reba McEntire, like you said, Kenny Rogers, and of course Eddie Rabbitt. Was there a difference in the music industry between repping country artists versus, let's say, pop and rock?
Sure. When I, well, I'm from LA. We've mentioned that, and I practiced in LA, started my business in LA in Beverly Hills. When I first came to Nashville in the mid 70s, and that's when I met Eddie. And before Kenny Rogers took off, I didn't think of Kenny as country anyway. He lived in LA. I went up to his house on Nemes Road all the time. Um, there was tremendous resentment here in Nashville. I say here, I'm in Nashville. I live in Nashville now. Um, with Roy Orbison, for example, people felt in the record business, the artists were lucky to have hits, and that was part of when we were talking about the low royalty rate. Um, they were discouraged from having a lawyer. Artists were discouraged from having a lawyer. When I first came here, talking about Roy Orbison or Eddie Rabbitt, it was like, no, they can't own the masters. They can't have more money. We're not paying advances because we do all the work. We spend all the money. Over time, and particularly with Kenny and Eddie and Crystal Gale, and ultimately Reba, although I started with Reba in 1987. So it was after the kind of battles that we had to fight to get there with Kenny and Crystal and Eddie. A guy who helped me make it happen is still around here, and he's not in the business, just a great guy. Joe Galante was the head of RCA and Sony, and he was somebody that would sit down with me and go, okay, but he's from New York. It's like, maybe we could do that. I want to do that. And he believed in the artist really, really strongly. Uh, when I'm talking country with Kenny and Crystal, it's a lot different. Crystal was signed to United Artists in, oh, this might be book two, right? We could be talking about Crystal Gale and a
Well,
lot of other people.
I've interviewed Crystal before.
Yeah. So by the way, she's still, as you know, as humble as ever. Just great. But anyway, it was very, very hard in country music to accomplish the things that needed to be accomplished. But we did it.
Well, I know one thing. I think country music will always be thankful to the rising star of Randy Travis because he put country back where it needed to be. Of course, right now, country's kind of going through this weird phase right now, but it was Randy that set country on fire. And if it wasn't for Randy Travis, there wouldn't be Alan Jackson, there wouldn't be Garth Brooks,
Yeah.
and the rest of them. And still remember the day when I heard Forever and Ever Amen on the radio. I went, oh my gosh, this is a game changer. And you have a whole chapter on Randy, but I want to ask you something because we're with artists like Gloria and Emilio Estefan, Roy, um, I guess Eddie Rabbitt, and then of course Randy Travis. For you as an entertainment lawyer, you had to take that lawyer hat off many times and put on the friend hat because there was a lot of situations that happened amongst all of those people.
I try to this day to be objective, and while people, it's great to be friends and considered a friend with talent, but I also know it's my job to give them the best advice that I can when it's personal as well as when it's business. So in times of trouble, like we talked about with Brian Wilson and Eugene Landy, I have to tell the artist what's best. There's an incident in the book that I don't feel like compelled to talk about in the show with Eddie, where I, I he wouldn't speak to me for 1 year over something that I said to him, and yet I would stand by what I said to him or anybody else forever. Uh, I haven't been fired for that. I've been fired. One of the things that I think people enjoy about the book is when I talk about getting fired by some of those people, getting fired by Quincy. It was cute in a sense, and he and I could laugh about it. But you ask me to breakfast, and you tell me I have to change lawyers. What is our breakfast going to be about? Pancakes? It I never change in terms of how I advise artists. Even Olivia, after 50 years, and now Olivia's daughter Chloe, who's turning 40 next month, has all kinds of questions about why or how we did things and what was her mom thinking. I never changed my point of view because of the relationship.
Yeah, now you and I love the fact that like when Gloria and Emilio had their accident, the troubles
Oof.
that Randy had, and
Yep.
uh, and I think there's a big lesson in the Randy Travis chapter when it comes to Lib because I could never figure that situation out, even when it played out into the public. It literally till this day makes no sense to me. But I want people to read this book. But there was a chapter in this book that really shocked me, and I was not expecting it when I turned the page. But you were friends with Jose and Kitty Menendez, and you have very strong opinions in that chapter, as you don't believe any of the allegations that Eric and Lyle said in court about their parents and the reason why they killed them. Now the whole thing is being replayed in the media. Is the media trying to get them set free so they can make money from them? Maybe a reality show? Because we live in a sick world, and it seems that the entertainment industry loves clickbait or a rolling train wreck.
I was a close friend of both Jose and Kitty and Jose's lawyer, which I talk about. I insisted on putting the picture in the book of Jose and Kitty at our wedding because at my wedding to Bianca in 1988, be specific as we're on the air, there were real people and there were really nice people. And when people see the photo of Jose and Kitty in 1988 at our wedding, they're going to see the real Jose and Kitty. The picture that's been painted years after the murders, maybe starting 3 years when Leslie Abramson came in and got the boys to start that whole story, which they never told before, that Jose was sexually abusing them and beating them. And then they came up with it was self-defense. We were afraid they were going to kill us. It's nonsense. And it's a horrible, horrible experience to have gone through. For almost a year, the sons would call me. I knew Jose was a dad who'd want to know that I would help his sons. I couldn't believe that I was talking to people that just murdered my friend and client until they finally got arrested. And I talk about that with the Beverly Hills Police Department. So the story now, I don't think the media is looking to make money per se from the boy's story. Maybe they can. I just feel that it's a story that this story of sexual abuse fits into this time frame of the Me Too movement and Harvey Weinstein and P Diddy, and it's what media feel people want to hear. California is another country, so what I see in terms of the case legally was a district attorney in Los Angeles who wanted to be reelected, who was way on the left side, and that was a great way for him to get some publicity right before an election. But he lost, and the guy that won hasn't treated the case or the guys the same way. So now, if it plays out in court and they get out because they've done their time or whatever, so be it. I resent the news coverage of it because it's a sad story, and there's no good ending to this.
Yeah, there's no good ending at all. But I do want to ask one last question to you real
Yes.
quick here because Ozzy Osbourne just passed away. You had many of your clients who had passed away as well. So we're living in that age. But how is managing one's estate and intellectual property different than managing them as while they were alive?
It's a really great question, Warden. It's a completely different part of the business that I'm in, but I am insistent with all my clients that they get top level estate planning. And I haven't had a problem with anybody, but I was reading in the paper this Monday, what is today, is Wednesday, 2 days ago, about a lawsuit between Jimmy Buffett's widow, Jane, and Jimmy Buffett's former accountant, whose name I'm not going to mention. And they're the co-trustees of Jimmy Buffett's estate, which the story said is worth 275 million. Jimmy Buffett, I don't know what he thought. Could have done a better job of estate planning than have his wife and his widow and his accountant suing each other over how the trust is administered. And I try to do better. I try to ensure that the clients are well aware of what they want to have happen. We all will die. And when you mentioned that, Ozzy Osbourne died yesterday. One of my greatest friends and influences as a lawyer. I talk about it in the 7 years that I was at Kaplan Livingston and trying to figure out how to start a law firm with this guy Skip Brittingham, and he died last Thursday. It just being 79, I'm well aware of what's going on out there. But from the estate planning point of view, it's never too early. First thing you do if you have some success is get an estate plan. Tax planning, right? That's where I start with people, including all the people we've talked about in the book. It was all said. You don't read any problems with their estates. Thank you.
Well, you are very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, the stars shine in John Mason's book, Crazy Lucky, remarkable stories from inside the world of celebrity icons. And we barely scratched the surface in this interview. But this book isn't a tell all book. This is a book of life in the entertainment business. And I found it quite positive, endearing, educational, and yes, there are a few sad moments, but life isn't a bed of roses, especially in the entertainment business. So take it from me, you'll love reading every page, every chapter. And John, I want to thank you so much for being on my show today. And again, if this book was a movie, I'm already ready for the sequel.
Thanks, Ward. It's been a pleasure.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can catch all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel. Of course, you can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, and Audible, and more. I want to thank you for watching, and you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.